Hello, I'm Rosemary Taylor and I'm a shamanic practitioner, and I've been working as a shamanic practitioner since 2002, and I've gathered information over the years and I'd like to share some of it with you now. I'd like to share some helpful advice on how to smudge your own energy field, and smudge is a term that means cleanse or clear your energy field using sage. Now this is a sage smudge stick, and it's a very, very useful and helpful tool in preparing your energy for sacred work and in clearing the energy of sacred objects that you use a lot in your spiritual practice, for clearing the actual space of the room that you work in, and also the whole building or the whole house that you live in. But today what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on how we can use sage smudge to cleanse your own personal energy field, or your aura as it's sometimes called, and how we can cleanse the energy field of sacred objects that you use quite often. Okay, so perhaps I should clear up a potential area for confusion here, because you've probably heard of sage as a culinary herb that can be grown in gardens and that we like to put in sage and onion stuffing, for example. But that's not this sage. That's a different plant. Culinary sage that you're familiar with is a member of the mint family and has been used traditionally as an internal medicine that you ingest and that cleanses you internally, your physical systems, as well as a herb that adds flavouring to your food. This plant is a different plant, and its proper name is Artemisia tridentata, and it's a member of the wormwood family, but it's commonly known as desert sage or California sage or white sage. And it grows in dry, barren areas, like, for example, New Mexico or Wyoming or Utah. But not only in North America, it can grow in places like on the Russian steppes or in Canada. So it is a plant, though, that is associated with the native North American tradition. Now, we use this plant a lot in contemporary shamanic practice and in contemporary Western shamanic trainings, but we shouldn't assume that every single genuine Native American individual uses sage for the purposes of purification. It should be pointed out that Native American tradition is not one homogenized single set of practices, but there are many diverse nations, Native American nations, and they all have their own individual customs and taboos around the use of particular plants. So let's just bear that in mind first of all. Having said that, though, what the original medicine people did when they discovered this plant in their environment, they didn't think of it always just a commodity I can use. They would have had a practice for connecting with the intelligence of plants and for finding out from that direct intelligence that the plant possessed what the plant would be good for, what use it would be good for. And so we have to remember that this is an ally, this plant is an ally, and we can have a relationship with it and we can have communication with it. So therefore it's always appropriate to thank this plant energy before you use it, to offer it some thanks for its existence, and for the way it can help us, and also to express your intention to this plant so it knows what you're trying to do. Perhaps you can specify that you want to clear your own energy field, or that you want to clean the energy of all your sacred and ritual objects, or indeed the space that you work in or the house that you live in. You should speak that intention from your heart with love, and I am sure that the plant will respond. So, having said all that, and having outlined the fact that people probably originally got to know what its use would be by talking to it, there is now scientific verification that strongly suggests that all the perceptions of the Native American people about sage was absolutely correct. At last, again, science is catching up with the spirit realms and with our connection to the spirit realms. So some actual studies have been undertaken by a native North American woman called Oshina Fastwolf of the Tene tribe, and she holds a degree in experimental psychology, and she's worked with different scientists in different institutions in America and gathered evidence. And it appears absolutely correct that the particular quality of this kind of sage is to be able to seize and extract from the air positive electrical ions. So a positive ion is a kind of electrical charge that attracts pollutants to it. And you will notice this most obviously on your electrical equipment. You'll notice how your TV screen gathers dirt and grime and dust really quickly. And that's because it emits a positive ion, and that those ions attract pollution. So what we're aiming for is to remove some of the positive ions from your own energy field, because you are an electromagnetic being. And so proportionately, the amount of negative ions within your field will increase, will be greater than the number of positive ions. And you might know what that would feel like if you imagine being close to a natural body of water, like a lake or a waterfall. Then you'll know how refreshing and bright and light the atmosphere seems around the water. And also you will know how bright and light and refreshed the atmosphere is after an electrical storm. That's because after an electrical storm, there are more negative ions in the air than positive ions. So, wouldn't you like to feel that bright and light and fresh? I know I would, and so this is why we're discussing how to cleanse your personal energy field. Okay, so this is a brand new sage smudge stick, and you might notice that it has cotton string wrapped around it. Okay, that's basically just to keep all the bundle together. But when we use it, we're going to unwrap a little bit of that cotton string, just so we can loosen the leaf packing and get some air in, because if we get air into it, then it will light more easily. Now I'm going to use a smudge stick that has already been used, and you might notice it's already been used because it's a little bit black at the top where it's burnt. So you see how this has been unraveled a little bit, and then how you can very gradually you can ease the leaves apart. Now another tool that we use when we're using sage is a heat-proof receptacle. Now you can just use a ceramic bowl or a Pyrex dish, but it's traditional to use this lovely kind of shell, which is an abalone shell, and it too is heat-proof, and it's heat-proof enough to make using the smudge stick safe. Once you've finished using it, you can pop it in there and there should be no risk of fire. Okay, so let me show you how I would light this smudge stick. So I would hold this smudge stick kind of a little upside down, so the principle is the heat from the lighter will rise up into the smudge stick and light it more quickly because heat rises. So we're concentrating the heat. And if it feels a little too hot, just bring the smudge stick round to that angle, because your hand will then feel the rising heat less and it might be more comfortable for you. Let's see how it goes. Oh, there we go. The flame went out by itself. But if it hadn't, what I would do is I would gently blow it out like this. So now you might see that this smudge stick is smoking very beautifully, very nicely. And to keep it smoking, we use the draft from a feather. You could use a fan if you have one. But a feather is a very well-known shamanic tool. And I found this feather in nature, well, by the banks of the Thames, many years ago, and it previously belonged to a Canada goose. And I use it only for this purpose now, for smudging, using sage, and I've grown very attached to it. And we should talk a little bit now about sympathetic energy, because it's nice that this particular feather belonged to a bird that is very territorial, feisty, and assertive. Because what I want to do is use that kind of assertion to drive away negative energy from me. Indeed, I think the Romans used flocks of geese as a guard dog. So they would have flocks of geese around their properties, and any approaching trespasser would alarm the geese, and the geese would start honking. So goose energy has that kind of quality about it of clearing away unwanted or suspect energies. So now that this smudge stick is lit and smoking, how do you clear the energy in your energy field? Well, you use your intuition, but also you're a little bit methodical. You can just simply methodically waft over every area of your body, which is sensible. But you can also spend extra time on the areas of your body that you feel or you know holds a lot of heavy residual emotional energy. Now, I like to place the smudge over my crown chakra with the intention of clearing any fog that's there or anything that might impede my connection to spirit. Now, what you might do is concentrate in areas where you feel tight or anxious or heavy. Throat chakras often get like that. Our throat centers often clam up when we need to speak, especially if we have a public speaking engagement. Or there might be some other area of your being that you know holds a lot of residual emotional energy for you. The solar plexus is a common area as well. Now, if your smudge stick ever looks like it's slowing down or about to go out, then you just light it again. It's that simple. There we go. And now what I would also do is I would run the smoke under the palms of my hands, because our hands touch everything, and we will often come into contact with heavy energy by touching objects that we ourselves have touched in the past or other people have. And I'd run it over and under the limbs. I would also kind of try and reach around my back and use my intention and the goose feather to waft it behind me. But if you can't reach behind you, or you're worried about touching your hair, then someone else maybe can do your back for you. I would also run the smoke down over my legs, and I'd also place the smoke under the sole of my foot, just like that. So the sole of my foot, whether in a sock or bare feet, would be cleared and cleansed. So how do you put out a sage smudge stick? Well, you think of it a little bit like a cigarette, in fact, and you kind of stub it out in your heat-proof receptacle, and that just starves the head of the stick from oxygen, and so it's likely to go out quicker. But if you just leave it burning, it should eventually go out by its own accord, but don't leave things burning unattended. That's a very sensible thing to say. Okay. So you have another option with sage. If you're a little bit nervous about lighting a sage smudge stick, because, for example, little smuts can drop off it, and they're usually okay, because by the time they touch the floor, they've usually cooled down, or they've gone out completely. But you know, if you have a brand new, beautiful cream coloured carpet and you want to keep it absolutely spotless, then perhaps the better option for you would be to use loose sage. And you can get loose sage in bags, and it looks like this. It's just the leaves that are all kind of loose and separated. And then you get your abalone shell or your heat-proof receptacle. Probably a shell is better for this if you're using burning loose sage directly. And you pop it in, and then you light those sage leaves. I'll just show you how to do that. So you just gather a bunch of the leaves in your fingertips, kind of that much, and you hold it again over the receptacle and you light it. And you just blow the flame out again, and you drop the lit pieces back into your shell. There we go. I don't know if you can see, but that is actually burning really well, even though we've only lit just a few leaves. So while we're here with some lovely burning sage, what else can we do with it? I'm just going to light a little bit more. Well, as I said earlier, we can clear the energy field of your sacred spiritual objects. So, for example, crystals. This is one way, only one way, but it's a good way of cleansing crystals, because many crystals, not every crystal, but many crystals will gather heavy energy after use. So you just gently run that lovely crystal through the smoke. Now, another thing you can do is, if you often wear jewellery, just think how often when you're wearing jewellery you're having a bit of a down day, or things aren't going right and you're spilling out heavy energy. Well, why not cleanse your jewellery if it's precious to you? That's another thing you can do. And also, if you buy a new sacred object from a shop, or you use sacred objects a lot on your altar, great thing to do is to cleanse it. So, for example, this is my lovely Peruvian jaguar, mother jaguar, and she does a lot of good work, and she holds the space on my medicine altar. And why wouldn't I want to thank her in this way? It's a nice thing to do. And also, if she was brand new and I didn't really know, much about who had handled her or how long she'd been in the shop, then I might want to smudge her. And, well, it's a way of welcoming her into my home and thanking her before she even does the work that I bought her for. So that's always a good thing to do, is to thank an ally, any kind of ally, spiritual ally, is to thank them before you ask them for anything. So that's what I would do with a new object that I'm bringing into my home. Okay, so if you feel very heavy or very down or very angry, or, well, life is just like that sometimes, and you feel you need to add more power to the sage, although the sage is very, very powerful, then you can use another shamanic tool, and that is a rattle. Now, I have different rattles, and they all have slightly different sounds. You will be attracted to the sound of a rattle, and you might have several rattles and feel like each different sound is good for a different purpose or good for a different mood. This is quite a sharp, loud sound, it's quite percussive. And something you can do before using it, again, is cleanse it. But you can go into your own energy field with this rattle. And rattle in your own energy field before you use the sage smoke. The sage smoke happens to be smoking at the same time. But what I would probably do first is rattle. And that's because sound moves through everything. Sound does move through everything. And it breaks up and loosens stuck, really difficult energy. And then once it's been loosened, I would come in with the sage and my feather, and I would clear that energy away. And the thing about the rattle and the sound of the rattle is that it is energizing. It adds intent. It adds powerful intent to what you want to achieve. So you really mean it, and it focuses you, and it empowers you, and it gives welly to what you are doing. Shamanic welly. Now, because sage is a powerful plant and it does do what we ask it to do, I just pass on a note of caution that I was advised about when I did one of my shamanic trainings, and that it's probably safest not to use it around pregnant ladies, because it purges energy, and pregnant ladies might want to think carefully about whether they would want to use that during their pregnancy. It might induce labour, although this is anecdotal. I've never experienced this personally, and I don't know anyone who has, but that doesn't mean to say it's not true or not possible. So just be aware of that. There would be other incenses and plant allies and plant powers that you could use if you were pregnant. And a lovely example of that is frankincense and myrrh resin. Okay, so that's the main chunk of information I wanted to share with you today, and I hope it's been helpful. If it's ignited an interest in shamanic practice within you, then I run a lovely retreat at a place called Healing Waters in Glastonbury, which is itself a lovely location. And the retreat is called Shamanic Journeying and Power Animals, and it will teach you more of the basics of a personal shamanic practice. So it will teach you about opening sacred space, how we do that in the shamanic way. It will provide information about the medicine wheel and how that helps us and how it guides us through life. My aim with this retreat is to connect you with your own personal animal guide, your power animal who is dedicated to your spiritual growth and to your well-being. And we experience healing ceremony work with our power animals. And the other main thing that this retreat introduces you to, it gives you an opportunity to learn shamanic journeying, which is going into a very light, safe trance state in which you are empowered to speak directly to your own guides, who can give you guidance individually for you without you having to go to a third party or practitioner to find out what you need to do. So again, if any of that interests you, you're welcome to contact me. And I'd just like to end by saying thank you very much for listening. And I hope this has been helpful information, and have a lovely day. Thank you and goodbye.